2023 was a historic year for gaming. Unreal Engine and its vast possibilities paved the way for a massive collection of high-quality games. From Spider-Man 2 to Baldur's Gate, almost every genre boasted a breakout title that exceeded expectations and truly lived up to the hype. But let's not ignore the fact that there were titles that were not only overhyped, but they never even came close to living up to their names. Today, we're going to take a look at 10 games that absolutely ruined 2023 for everybody.
We can't let them get their nasty, filthy hands on our flesh.
Number 10, Redfall. To kick off our list at number 10, we have Redfall. Redfall was one of the most hyped releases for 2023, but sadly, the game was not able to live up to its expectations. You know, there's been chatter about starting a Worst Game of the Year award, and if that ever happens, Redfall is definitely leading the race. From bugs and glitches to AI that seems to have a mind of its own, this game is a roller coaster of disappointments. I gotta talk about the storytelling first. It's as if the developers decided that PowerPoint slides were the way to go, with the cutscenes more static and lifeless than you'd ever expect from a AAA title. It's like watching a story unfold through a series of still images, and honestly, it's pretty underwhelming. Now onto the animations, or should I say the lack thereof? It seems like the budget ran dry after the trailers were made. Everything in the game screams unfinished and rushed. It's a real letdown, especially considering the potential this game had, and the performances.
Come on! We got this!
Boy, this game is locked at 30 frames per second on consoles. In today's gaming world, it's like promising a gourmet meal and then going, hey, we have no flavor. What? Gamers expect and deserve better. The gameplay and AI are where things really start to fall apart. The combat is far from challenging, making the game feel like more like a walk in the park than an epic battle against vampires, and the enemies, they're about as intimidating as a newborn baby. The lack of challenge really takes away from the experience. Oh, and the open world of Redfall, vast? Sure, but as empty and lifeless as a deserted island with no Tom Hanks and Wilson. There's no drive to explore, no excitement in discovery. You're like wandering around a world that forgot to be alive. Overall, Redfall is the perfect example of a game that's just not finished, but also it's uninspired. It's a stark reminder of the challenges facing Xbox game studios in delivering quality first-party titles. My advice, save your money, or if you're really curious, maybe check it out on Game Pass with some friends for a laugh, but beyond that, stay away. Next up on the list at number 9, we have Unholy. In general, it's rare for horror games to be on this list, as jump scares and intense environments often manage to keep a user on the tip of their toes. Unfortunately, this was not the case for Unholy. The game sets you up for what seems like a gripping horror adventure. You play as Dorothea, a mother on a quest to save her son's soul from a malevolent cult. Yes, sounds cool. The setting, an underworld city brimming with eerie vibes and monstrous enemies. It sounds cool, right? But here's where things start to fall apart. Firstly, the controls, they're unresponsive and clunky, making every move feel like a chore. And the AI, it's erratic to say the least. You'd expect the enemies to be challenging, but instead they're just like, frustrating. The combat system doesn't do the game any favors at all. You've got these emotion-fueled powers, which sounds awesome on paper, but in reality, they're ineffective against enemies who only get stunned momentarily. And if you miss your shot or they survive your attack, well, you're likely to be killed instantly, which sends you all the way back to a checkpoint that's really, really far away. Dorothea's movement is another pain in the butt. She moves so slowly. It's like she's not even trying to escape danger. Plus, she gets stuck on random objects, making it even more cumbersome to navigate through the game. Now, talk about the stealth mechanics. They're unreliable at best. You'd spend most of your time trying to sneak around, but the mechanics are so dodgy that it's rarely enjoyable. The game tries to mix things up with a mystical mask that Dorothea wears. It has special vision modes, but oddly, you can't use them while operating her slingshot. Like, why? It's a strange limitation that makes certain tasks unnecessarily difficult. Even the plot in Dorothea's character falls flat. Her personality is hard to like. The story's conclusion is so underwhelming that leaves you wondering why you even bothered investing all this time in the first place. Despite the intriguing setting of Eternal City, it was intriguing. Unholy fails to capitalize on its potential. The puzzles are lackluster, the enemy variety is limited, and the overall gameplay feels repetitive and dull. It's a game that might not be completely unplayable, but it's definitely uninspired, and it's unlikely that it's going to keep you engaged until the end. So overall, the lack of action resulted in a ton of players dropping the game and not even bothering to complete it all the way. Yeah, that's sad. At number 8, Wanted Dead. At number 8, we find Wanted Dead, a game that, well, let's just say it left a lot to be desired. From the creators of Ninja Gaiden and Dead or Alive, this game had some big shoes to fill, but sadly, they tripped and fell straight onto their face. First off, the story, it is a flaming dung heap of a mess. The plot feels like a jumble of random cutscenes with an art style that just doesn't connect, like for me, at least. It's like they were trying to make a so bad it's good game, but ended up with something that's just like, bleh, bad. The voice acting, and this is the sad part, because this is what I do for a living, guys. It's not that impressive. The voice acting is not that good. Then there's the gameplay. It's a slasher shooter hybrid, right? Which sounds cool, but the execution is pretty terrible. The guns feel weak and the enemies are just too spongy. You'd expect some satisfaction from the combat, right? But no, even the swordplay with its blocking and parrying system ends up feeling clunky and frustrating. The game's camera is another big problem. In tight corridors and alleyways, it's a struggle to even see what's happening. This, combined with the awkward cover system and invisible walls, makes combat more of a chore than a thrill. And let's talk about the minigames. They're thrown in there presumably for comic relief, but they end up feeling like low-effort distractions. Like from ramen eating challenges to karaoke, they don't add anything meaningful to the experience. Like, why did you add it? Now, some might argue that the game is intentionally bad, like a love letter to 6th generation consoles, but here's the problem. It's a letter that nobody asked for. Wanted Dead just doesn't deliver the fun or engagement you'd expect from a game with such a pedigree. The combat, which should be the game's saving grace, is repetitive and lacks depth. There's no evolution or variety in the fights, making the whole experience feel still pretty quickly. And finally, the game's technical issues. Frequent crashes, especially on modern consoles, just add insult to injury. It hurts. It's one thing to have a game that's a bit rough around the edges. I'm fine with rough. I like rough. Rough is fine. But when it constantly crashes, that's a whole nother level of annoying. At number 7, we have what might be one of the most talked about flops of 2023, Call of Duty Modern Warfare 3's campaign mode. Now, it's likely you guys already seen a ton of posts claiming that this is the worst title to be launched from the Call of Duty series, and yes, but the majority of these claims are because of the short 4-hour campaign length of the game. Though Call of Duty campaigns are like, yeah, they're generally short, Modern Warfare 3's campaign mode was called up for using repetitive environments for most of the game. The game introduced, quote, open combat systems, which gave players the option to take up missions in the order they want, and players eventually labeled those missions as a lazy excuse to avoid introducing new environments into the game. Now I gotta talk about the story, or like the lack of one really. But first, spoiler alert, for anyone who still wants to complete the campaign, I suggest skipping this one and moving on to number 6. Modern Warfare 3 starts with the antagonist, Makarov, breaking out of jail, establishing him as a formidable villain. However, the story doesn't really evolve from there. We see characters like Captain Price and Farah reacting to Makarov, but there's no significant development or change in their motivations or actions throughout the campaign. And one of the biggest issues is the lack of character development. Characters like Price, Farah, and Soap remain largely static, with their emotions and objectives unchanged from beginning to end. The story introduces other characters like Melina, Yuri, and Nikolai, but they don't add much to the narrative. The plot points feel completely disconnected and fail to create a cohesive storyline. The pacing and structure are another big problem. The campaign consists of chasing after weapons and enemies, with each threat being neutralized almost as quickly as it's introduced. You're like, oh no, here's a problem. Oh, look at that, it's already fixed. This repetitive cycle doesn't allow for any real tension or stakes to build up. Even major plot points like the chemical weapons threat doesn't have a lasting impact or consequence in the story. The game even tries to set up several potentially interesting plot threads, like the trustworthiness of characters like Graves and Shepard, but of course, these don't lead anywhere substantial. One of the most interesting aspects of the game is how the game handles the death of Soap, a fan favorite character, and his death was so quick, so abrupt, it doesn't even have the emotional impact it should, especially for a game that has an absolutely massive budget ranging in the hundreds of millions. And then there's the ending. The campaign concludes with Makarov running away, and the game abruptly ends, leaving the story feeling unfinished and lacking a proper resolution. It's as if the writers were all working on it and then said, hey, let's go to lunch, and then never came back to finish it. At number 6, I'm going to talk about a game that came in with a massive amount of hype, Crime Boss Rocky City. This game was all over the place because of its star-studded cast. I'm talking like big names like Chuck Norris Big, Danny Trejo, and Michael Rooker. You'd think with a lineup like this, the game would be a slam dunk. No! How could you mess up a game with Chuck Norris in it? I don't know. From the get-go, players encountered issues even launching the game. Once in, the excitement quickly went away. The narrative was thin, leaving many wondering where all of these promised celebrities were and what roles they played in the story. And that's just the tip of the big problem. The gameplay itself? Ooh, boy, where do I even start? The missions felt repetitive and uneventful, with players often finding themselves in similar situations with little variation. The combat mechanics were sketchy at best, and the enemy AI, let's just say it left a lot to be desired. And then there's the voice acting. This hurts me every time I have to bring this up. It's my job. I love voice acting. Cause like, sure, having big names in your game sounds great on paper, but the execution was a different story.
Sheriff, we have movement on the dragon.
Tell me.
It seems he's looking for the king's killer. His guys are beating up thugs left and right, sir.
He will be moving up the ranks soon.
It's like somebody made a mistake in the recording session, because performances ranged from flat to downright cringeworthy. It's almost like they said, hey, let's use the first take instead of the second one, lacking any real emotion or effort. But despite all of this, Crime Boss Rocky City had some strangely compelling moments. The cutscenes, while not exactly high art, were so over the top that they became a sort of like, guilty pleasure. It's like watching a car crash. Like, you can't look away. You know what I mean? The game did try to innovate with its roguelike elements and board game style turf wars, but even these features couldn't save the day. Players found themselves stuck in a loop of defense defending and attacking territories, which quickly becomes boring. To top it all off, the game was riddled with bugs and technical issues, from freezes mid-game to characters' models failing to load. These glitches just added to the already terrible game. Crime Boss Rocky City was a game that promised so much, yet delivered so little. It's a classic case of style over substance, where even a star-studded cast couldn't mask its fundamental flaws, which how do you do that? How do you mess up a game with Chuck Norris in it? I don't know. The gameplay was repetitive, the voice acting was underwhelming, and the technical issues were just the nasty icing on an already super disappointing cake. Halfway through the list, we've come to the perfect spot to hit that subscribe button. Alright, anyways, we gotta talk about Skull Island Rise of Kong, a game that many are calling the worst game of 2023, and let me tell you, after playing it, I can see why. First off, the game was developed by a team called Iguan and published by Game Mill Entertainment. Now, Game Mill has a bit of a reputation for churning out some questionable titles, but this one, woo, this one takes the cake. Skull Island Rise of Kong was released at $40, and I've gotta say, for that price, you'd expect something decent, right? Well, not quite. The game presents itself as an origin story for King Kong with the promise of epic battles and immersive experiences, but here's the catch, it fails miserably in making you feel like you're playing as the iconic giant ape. Instead, Kong feels average, and the game world around him is just equally bland and uninspiring. The gameplay is your standard fare of light and heavy attacks, a good old dodge roll, and a block with some special moves thrown in. And it's also repetitive and just plain boring. You're basically just button mashing like crazy. No need for any strategy or change in tactics, regardless of the enemies you face. Exploration and platforming are just equally as bad. The levels are huge and confusing with no clear direction. You end up running in circles most of the time. The level design does nothing to engage you, and the platforming elements feel like an afterthought. But the real kicker, the technical issues. Holy Moses! Buckets, where do I start? Well, from bugs that soft lock the game, making it impossible to progress, to Kong getting stuck in platforms, to enemies not spawning correctly, the list goes on! It's a mess, and it significantly ruins whatever little enjoyment you might squeeze out of this game. And graphically, Skull Island Rise of Kong looks dated and rushed, with blocky, low-resolution designs and a flat art style that doesn't do the iconic character justice at all. The cutscenes are they are so bad, with awkward animations and some truly questionable choices. And what's even more confusing is the soundtrack and audio design. It's pretty intense and tries to set an epic tone, but it's marred by low-quality sound effects. It's like they said, hey, let's go back to the early 2000s and use that audio quality. Bad plan. Now I gotta talk about the colossal edition of this game. For an extra 15 buckaroos, what do you get? Well, you get some film grain filters, color variants, and a boss rush mode. Oh, and by the way, a few behind-the-scenes extras. Yeah, that feels like a blatant cash grab to me, for a game that's already under-delivering on its basic promises. Skull Island Rise of Kong is a game that had potential, but ended up being a colossal disappointment. It's overpriced, technically flawed, and it's not fun to play. Moving on to number 4, we have The Walking Dead Destinies. It sounds amazing on paper, right? You play through the beloved Walking Dead universe. That's so cool, and I love it. I'm so excited. And then here's the twist. You get to change the destinies of your favorite characters. I'm like, woo, sign me up, guys. That's a fan's dream come true. Because that's like a fan's dream come true. But the dreams quickly turn into, well, let's just say not dreams. Like, I gotta talk about the graphics. If you're expecting to see Rick, Daryl, and the gang looking like they just stepped out of your TV screen, haha, think again. It's like they took the TV show's characters and gave them a budget makeover, not the good kind of budget makeover. We're talking about graphics that make you nostalgic for the early 2000s and not in a good way. Now onto the gameplay. You know, in some games the combat feels fluid and exciting. Yeah, not this game. It's like they wanted to mix stealth and action but ended up with a clunky mess. You're either tiptoeing around zombies like they're sleeping babies or awkwardly swinging melee weapons and wondering if the hit actually connected. But wait, there's more. The game promised that you could change the destinies of the characters, which sounds epic, right? It turns out to be more like choosing between whether you want your left or right foot to step into a puddle. That is boring. The choices are there, but they don't really feel like they have any impact. It's like, congratulations, you saved this character. And on top of that, the game still chugs along the same old tracks. I'm like, no, don't do that. I want a different destiny. I want a different end result. And the bugs, oh gosh, the bugs. You'd think you were in a feature-length documentary about the Amazon rainforest with the number of bugs in this game. Characters glitching through walls, zombies doing the moonwalk, which is kind of funny, but it's a technical nightmare. The Walking Dead Destinies is a classic case of a great idea getting lost in poor execution. It's like you ordered a thick, juicy Angus beef burger, and then you get served a vegan cauliflower burger covered in grape jelly. Not exactly what you were anticipating, was it? There are moments where you see what could have been, but they're buried under layers of issues. So should you play it? If you're a die-hard Walking Dead fan, sure, you might get a kick out of the settings and characters, but for everybody else, there are better zombie-filled worlds to explore. Stick to the Telltale series if you want a Walking Dead game that does the franchise justice. At number 3, we have the alien survival horror title Grey Hill Incident. So picture this, a low-budget fan-made sequel to a classic movie, but instead of capturing the essence of what made the original great, it takes all the worst parts and amplifies them by 1,000,000,000. That's what the Grey Hill Incident is in a nutshell. The game tries to tell you a classic alien invasion story. You're Ryan, a single father who apparently has a serious anger problem, and aliens invade his town. You're like, oh no! And then he's off on a mission to save the day! Sounds cool. Wrong. The story is as meandering and nonsensical as they come. You're basically running around doing chores with vague objectives like find Rachel. No waypoints, no directions, just wandering around hoping to stumble upon whatever you need next. And the dialogue, oh my gosh, the dialogue is painfully bad.
Stop bothering me. What's going on with you, Henry? Tell me.
The delivery is so stilted, it feels like it's being read by somebody who's never even seen the script before. I'm half convinced it was written by an AI chatbot and not the good kind. But the real tragedy of the game is its gameplay. It's a stealth game that seems determined to prove that stealth mechanics are not fun. You move so slow. And the aliens, they're like these small gray dim figures. They're about as threatening as a warm cozy blanket. And I love cozy blankets, so it's like, what? The aliens make cartoon noises. Yes, you heard that right. And when they catch you, you have a few seconds to break free before it's game over. But even that isn't scary, it's just annoying. The stealth mechanics are practically non-existent. You can hide in trash cans and cars. That's it. No distraction tactics, nothing to spice up the gameplay. It's all dull and boring. And then there are the bugs. Performance issues, objects disappearing, overlapping voice lines. It's a mess. It's almost like the game is trying to be bad. Anyways, I gotta talk about the aliens. They're supposed to be the big bads of the game. They're just laughable. They're easy to kill, and once you realize that, any sense of threat just poof, is gone. The game's ending is abrupt and unsatisfying, leaving you wondering what was the point of it all. It's like the developers just gave up. In conclusion, the Grey Hill Incident is a game that tries to be a thrilling horror experience that ends up being boring, tedious, frustrating, and unintentionally hilarious. It's a big mess. It's a prime example of how to not make a horror game. If you want to know what not to do, check out this one. Moving on to number 2, Lord of the Rings Gollum. So finally we made it to the top 2 on this list. At number 2, we find The Lord of the Rings Gollum, a game that had the potential to be an exciting exploration into one of Tolkien's most intriguing characters. I love Gollum! Anyways, it's anything but that. Instead, what we got is a game that is so riddled with issues, it's hard to know where to start. Firstly, let's talk about the gameplay. You'd expect some exciting stealth and platforming segments, right? No! The game's stealth mechanics are super primitive. The enemy AI is laughably bad, with orcs that forget about you the moment you step out of sight. The platforming feels like a poorly done homage to classics like Prince of Persia, with Gollum's movements being floaty and imprecise, often leading to unnecessary deaths. It got super annoying for me. And the game's missions? Oh yeah, they're a real treat if you enjoy mind-numbing tasks, collecting tags, flipping switches, and doing slave labor. Yeah, that sounds fun. That's the kind of exciting content we have in store for you. It's like the game is trying to make you empathize with Gollum's misery by subjecting you to it. Graphically, The Lord of the Rings Gollum is a mixed bag. While Gollum's model is pretty good, the overall visuals are underwhelming. The orc designs are especially weird. They look more like something out of a bad sci-fi movie than Tolkien's rich universe. But perhaps the most weird aspect, the most baffling thing of this game is its decision-making mechanics. It's a key part of Gollum's character, but here's reduced to a laughable UI that looks unfinished, and the choices make you feel inconsequential. And to add insult to injury, the game is plagued with technical glitches, from frame rate drops to getting stuck in the environment. It's as if the game is actively trying to be annoying. And don't even get me started about the cutscenes. They're abrupt, often poorly animated, and sometimes they end with no sound. The sound just stops. Overall, The Lord of the Rings Gollum is a masterclass in how not to adapt a beloved franchise. It fails miserably at being a fun game and does a disservice to Tolkien's legacy. If you're a fan of the franchise, do yourself a favor and stay away from this one. Number 1, to top off our list at the worst game of 2023, we have The Day Before. You know, it's not every day we get to witness a game launch that's an absolute train wreck, that is like so bad you just go, oh wow. Yeah, but The Day Before went above and beyond just to deliver just that. The Day Before was hyped up to be this ambitious open world MMO zombie survival game. The premise alone had gamers intrigued. The trailers looked pretty good, even if a bit too good to be true, but it's like, hey, let's hold out hope. Well, yeah, that was a mistake. When the game finally launched, it was met with overwhelmingly negative reviews. Players were quick to point out server issues, subpar gameplay, poor performance, and a total disconnect between the game's marketing and the actual product. Within just 4 days of its release, the studio behind the game Fantastic announced its closure due to a lack of funding. Oh boy, talk about a quick downfall. But let's backtrack a little bit and talk about those trailers. They were filled with red flags. Right from the start, ambitious claims like having the fidelity of The Last of Us and the world danger of The Division, all in a massive player-driven world. That's a big claim. The trailers showed off features like car customization, intricate environments, and a level of detail that seemed too advanced for an indie studio. As players would soon find out, most of what was promised in the trailers was not in the final game. Elements like the elevator, crafting, and even basic stealth mechanics were either misleading or just not there. The game turned out to be a half-baked extraction shooter, a far cry from the promised MMO experience that's like downright lying. Oh, and by the way, the tea thickens a little bit when you consider the amount of store-bought assets and potential plagiarism involved in the game's development. A deep dive into the game files by some very astute Redditors revealed that a significant portion of the game was made up of assets purchased from digital stores. This raised some questions about the authenticity of the studio's claiming of putting 5 years of blood, sweat, and tears into the game's development. I'm like, okay, nah, I don't think so. And to top it all off, just when the gaming community thought it couldn't get any worse, Fantastic shut down the studio, leaving players who invested their time and money in the game high and dry. The studio's closure was so soon after the game's release, it led to a lot of speculation. Was it that much complete incompetence or a deliberate scam? I say scam. The studio's vague and defensive responses on Twitter only added fuel to the fire. And what's baffling is that the day before was once the most wish-listed game on Steam. Yeah, it was. Yet it ended up being one of the most disastrous releases in gaming history. It's a classic case of a game that promised the moon, but just couldn't leave the ground. There was too much gravity. It's a stark reminder that in the world of gaming, if something seems too good to be true, it probably is. Beside these massive failures, 2023 was overall a pretty spectacular year, with tons of games breaking records and ending the year at an all-time high. But with the standards increasing year after year after year, there are a ton of titles that disappointed their fans. So tell me guys, what was your best and worst games of 2023? Let me know down in the comment section below. Also, if you enjoyed this video, please do drop a like and subscribe, and don't forget to turn on notifications. It's free to do, and it really does help out the channel. Thanks so much for watching, and I'll catch you in the next one.